and 7 on consent. I think we'll begin with a relatively short and routine item at the request of those involved. So we'll start with item number 5.
On item 5, the city administrative officer has submitted a report relative to amendments to the 207-2414 Memorandum of Understanding for the Los Angeles Professional Managers Association.
And if you could just give us your report.
Sure. Paul Gerard from the CAO Employee Relations Division. At the instruction of the EERC, what you have before you is 2 amendments to MOU 36, MOU between the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Professional Managers Association. One of the amendments, amendment number 5, changes the compensation level for Chief Investment Officer. The matter was brought before you by Lacers and Fire and Police Pensions, seeking salary compensation adjustments so that they can recruit more competitively when there are openings, and currently Lacers has an opening that they're trying to fill. The second amendment, amendment number 6, has to do with merely an inherent problem with the MOU itself. 2 or 3 classes are impacted by the fact that they are not appropriately spread in terms of what the administrative code requires as a supervisory differential. So what that means is that the 2 classes are not spread by 5.5%, they're spread by less, and this amendment merely corrects that so that payroll clerks don't have to make a manual adjustment from year to year.
And what job classes are the increased salary ranges comparable to?
On Amendment 5 or Amendment 6?
Both.
Both. Amendment 5 is only for Chief Investment Officer, and Amendment 6, we are amending the 3 classifications: Chief of Operations, actually 1 classification with 2 pay grades, Chief of Operations 1 and 2, and then Airport Manager. And we're only moving those up to comply with the administrative code, which is there must be 5.5% difference among supervisors and subordinates.
Right. Okay, Mr. Zine, any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Sure. I understand on the MOU 36, Amendment 6, when it comes to Amendment 5, salaries going from 120 up to 175, and the top end from 149 to 218. In this economic situation, is that reasonable to have that type of leap from 120 to 175 and a top of 149 to 218? I mean, it's like we have to be real with the economic situation. The city's facing another $250 million deficit, and we're talking about huge jumps. I mean, massive jumps. How has that been justified?
There was an independent report commissioned by the retirement systems looking at salaries for competitive agencies, and what it showed was that Los Angeles, in its current salary ranges, is at the low end of the market, and what that amounts to is that it significantly hinders our ability to attract and recruit the people who we feel will do the best job for our investment returns in the retirement systems and the Treasury, which invests our idle funds and makes us more money.
Well, aren't those returns in the pension funds low? The investments have not come through as we would anticipate. We keep hearing about pension funds, and the returns are not what are projected.
Councilmember, it might help that the general manager of Lacers is here, that he might be able to address some of these questions.
It just seems unreasonable. We have people camped out in the north end of City Hall that are down and out, and then we're given increases that to me are absolutely, in this day and age, out of the realm of reality. So take it away.
Tom Aldis from Lacers. Our investment returns have been very good compared to our peers. The issue is not being at all competitive on the salary. We lost our CIO to ERIP, and we've been trying to work to get the salary enhanced since then. When you look at our salary compared to the two most local jurisdictions that our salaries are often compared to, one is LaSarra, LA County. If our current CIO salary would be 5 positions down in their organization chart in their investment structure. Their chief investment officer makes in excess of $330,000 a year. So we could not even steal someone in the top few brackets away from LaSarra. Orange County, within the last year, hired a chief investment officer, and their range is $200,000 to $300,000, and they're paying the individual $260,000. So we're not even close to being competitive with the current salary structure, and even a small incremental improvement in year to year in our returns can have quite a large impact for the city and the contribution it has to make to Lacers.
Well, this goes back to 2007. So there'd be an increase, a retro check from 2007 to 2011?
Our position, we have someone who's an emergency appointment, chief investment officer. Once the salary gets settled on, we're going to be going out through an agency and trying to do a nationwide recruitment for our chief investment officer.
How many folks would this apply to in Schedule 5?
This applies to 2 individuals in the city of Los Angeles. It does not actually go back to 2007. We're only amending the schedules going forward, and it becomes.
It says 2007 to 2014.
That's the term of the MOU, but it is not retroactive. It would be implemented effective the first full pay period after the adoption of council, if council chooses to adopt it. So there would be no retroactive payment whatsoever.
Okay, because it's a little misleading when you look at that MOU with the dates of 07.
Understood.
It'd be a nice retro check for somebody.
In addition, I'd like to point out that incumbents will not be going from step 5 to step 5. What we also negotiated with LAPMA was that we will reassign them to the lowest step possible, thereby minimizing the impact, the immediate impact to salary accounts.
And where are our pension percentage? How fully funded are we with Lacers?
Well, we're going to be receiving a new valuation next month. We're in the mid-70s at this time on the
Did you say
funding.
mid-70s is good?
The funded ratio, all of the funded ratios throughout the country have taken a hit
I
with
agree,
the
but
economic
that's the
downturn.
problem. They've taken a hit, and these folks do the investments. Someone's responsible, since it's not 100% or 90%, 70%, which is a huge gap, that has to be made up from the general fund. And the general fund is already hurt. That's what I'm talking about. If we were 100% or 110% funded, I'd say, great. So whatever investment positions we held, now, LaSarra, where are they at? Where are they percent funded?
I would have to check on that, but they don't pre-fund their retiree health benefits, and that's a big plus that we have in the city that others don't have. If you were to shift that funding over to our retirement allowance assets, we would be 80+% funded. So it's in the difficult economic times where we really have to take a hard look at the downside risk in our investment portfolios that we need the best possible help on our investment staff.
I totally support that, and I totally support competent, qualified investments. My concern, I keep hearing that we have to keep taking money out of the general fund to fund the pension funds, and we keep on talking about pension reform, and that across the country, pension funds are collapsing just because there's no funds to put in there.
And the intent behind putting this position forward is to help us do the best we possibly can in our investments at Lacers, and therefore minimize the amount that we have to ask the city for.
Well, I know that you don't have control over the stock market. Is it up or down today? Up how much? Because every time you look at it, it's like a
Last I saw was 50 points up. It is whipsawing right now, that's correct.
which means our investments going up and down like a roller coaster.
Mhm.
And if anyone had the magic wand, it would be great. But the taxpayers are the ones who end up footing the bill.
Well, we were very fortunate last year. We had a 22.6% return on our investments.
Was that for 1 year, or was that?
That was 1 year.
1 year?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, you answered my question. It's only 2 people, so that has some minimal impact. It's not going to affect a lot of folks.
Okay, so I'd move that we note and file this report without objection.
Okay.
Then on item number 1, as much as I dislike the fact that we've had to continue this a few times, we got a report from the CLA, which I know is overburdened at this point, a little bit too late to really digest, and there are problems with varying entities that have different bases that seem not to mesh with these calculations. So I think we need some extra time to make heads or tails of it. I would ask that when we come back, if the CLA can attempt to compare what the costs, including cost and revenue as a result, what the net would be between 41 part-time officers and 41 full-time officers, because that was really what we want and haven't gotten. But we also need some time to look at the calculations. So I'll continue it, but if any of the speakers would like to speak at this time, I'll give them their 2 minutes. First speaker is Charles Leone from SEIU 721.
Councilmember Koretz, I want to thank you for your time. I apologize for the raspiness of my voice, but I have been participating with the Occupy Wall Street activities, which SEIU just endorsed today, and we very much support their cause. It's a big, yeah, doesn't it? It sounds a little raspy, something different. So thanks a lot, Mr. Zine. We do have concerns with the reports that have been coming out and the effort that has taken place in the city of Los Angeles to make part-time a job that should be a full-time position. As you probably very much are well aware, the job of traffic officer is one of the most dangerous jobs you could possibly have in the city of Los Angeles, especially in today's economy when you're sending people out in the streets to interact with the public and potentially take $50, $60, $70 out of their pocket. Regardless, how that person may have parked, the reality is they are put in harm's way, and the city needs to make sure that these folks are given the support that they need. It is a full-time job. Look at the part-timers that have been hired so far. You will be hearing testimony about workers that weren't even given the proper support, the proper supplies, the proper training. They've had to, even provide their own equipment. Can you imagine what the turnover would be like for this type of job if they're not given that type of support? When you have one of the most dangerous jobs, what's next? Part-time police officers? What's next? Part-time firefighters? Let's do a pilot with a job that we know isn't going to generate much community support, see how it goes, and then take it from there. It's just not going to work. In the end, you're going to see more fuzzy math from the CAO's office where they did not take into account the accurate count of personnel. You're going to see, especially when the report that you've just been given today with the CLA, numbers that have been skewed. They're saying that they're comparing everything to 100 part-timers. Well, the city's not going to see 100 part-timers till at the very earliest next year in January. We still believe it is not cost-effective going forward with part-timers. When you take into account the training, you're going to have to pull full-timers out of the field. You're going to have a high turnover rate. This is a job that needs to be full-time. It is one of the most dangerous jobs that exists in the city of Los Angeles. These are folks that have dedicated themselves to the city. They interface in the public. They generate revenue for our city that we know and love. Let's give them the support that they deserve. This is not a part-time job. And do not buy into the fuzzy math from the CAO's office. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Darren McDaniel.
Good morning. My name is Darren McDaniel. I've been a traffic officer, full-time traffic officer, for 11 years. According to the current piloting program, it's only running at 40%, which means that only 41 officers out of 100 have been hired. The first financial status report shows that the parking fines income is already $500,000 lower than expected. The actual number is about $468,000. Full-time officers are committed to partner with the department to work with the department to increase revenue. The part-time program creates a two-tier system and is not good for the morale and is not as efficient to create or generate revenue. Not only are the full-time officers able to generate higher revenue tickets, they also provide services to the public, such as retrieving stolen vehicles. So the solution is simple: to end the pilot program and turn part-time officers part-time officer into a full-time position so we can start generating revenue now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bert Sabrinia?
Good afternoon. My name is Sabrina Burt, and I am a part-time traffic officer. And I'm here today to tell you that I love my job, first of all. I have been serving the public ever since I've been in the workforce. The one concern that I do have is being a part-time officer. I have experienced a situation where I have personally had lost the revenue due to the fact that we wasn't trained on every aspect of being a traffic officer. For instance, I get a boot, and because I haven't been trained in that situation, it has to be reassigned to a full-timer. So therefore, by the time the full-timer get there, the citizen is gone. So what I'm saying to you is if we're out there and we're doing the job, out of due respect, train us totally for the job and make us full-timer. Another situation is, heavens forbid, if I witness a car accident, I am not trained to direct traffic. And my concern is because we live in an electronic stage, and they will have to take a picture of me standing there doing nothing because I haven't been trained. And that's not how I want to be on YouTube, because it would be embarrassing to me and the city also. And also, when I can experience and I understand the hostility that we get from the citizen, but when I go to my unit, I don't want that same hostility among us. I want us to be one. And because of the fact that we look different from the full-timers, and somehow we're being perceived as being different, but in reality, we're all doing the same job, and I want us all to be one family in one tier, one unit, and I don't want us to be separated within the workforce.
How do you look different?
We look different just by our uniform, by our training.
You don't have the same uniform?
No, we don't have the train uniform at all.
What's the difference?
We have white polo shirts, we have the vest, and we was told Friday that on our jacket, we can have the jacket, but we can't put traffic officer on our jacket. And I thought for sure that that's our title, is traffic
What do
officer.
you put on there?
They told us the only thing we can put on it is our name and the little city seal in the front. That's it.
Do they give you that equipment?
We have to purchase our own pants, our own shoes, and our own jacket.
What do they give you?
They gave us our rain gears and the 2 polo shirts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Elias?
Council members, take off my hat for you, hat head here. Council member Zine, I want to commend you for going out and speaking to the Occupy LA folks. And if you guys want to join us, we're going to go out and speak to the folks after the hearing here. I've never been one to mince words. I won't. I believe this program has been rotten from the start. Respectfully to the CLA, the CLA's report issued today assumes 100% functionality for this program. It's running at 41%. Let me repeat. This program is at 41%. They've only hired 41 people. So if you look at the ticket issuance assumption in their report, I recalculated it based on the numbers that we presented and that I'll present to you again today. 220,900 tickets will be issued if you convert these people immediately to full-time, whereas on the part-time side, 191,000. So clearly, we're winning there. We also made some very good assumptions that shows on this piece of information that Mr. Hirsch is handing over to you. If you convert these people today, you will make $325,000 at least $325,000 more this year. We make some very reasonable assumptions. We calculate cost of benefits for full-time, and we calculate overhead charges for full-time and part-time. Listen, the city didn't negotiate with us on the salary for part-time folks. They're paying them $4 less. That's not negotiated. It almost makes me feel like this is Walmart. And if this is Walmart, then we can continue with this program. Otherwise, negotiate with us on the salary for the part-time folks, and let's have a plan to convert them immediately to full-time to get at least above the target that you have for this program is 9 million. With full-time folks, you will get closer to that than you will with part-time folks. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll continue this to our next meeting, which actually is up in the air right now because we may have to reschedule our next regularly scheduled meeting. Also on item 5, we announced this as a note and file. Technically, it should be voted on as a motion to approve the report's recommendations. So if we could reflect that on number 5.
So you got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So next we have item 2, which Mr. Zine is your motion, so I'll let you take the lead on that.
All right, this is regarding the, you want to read that, Madam Clerk? I won't take your job away.
On item 2, motion signed Englander relative to requesting the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to amend Los Angeles Administrative Code to require city departments to report fraud, waste, and abuse, and further instruct the Ethics Commission and Personnel Department to include a fraud, waste, and abuse training in their biannual training, as well as other related matters. The Addison Governmental Efficiency Committee recommended approval with amendments made in committee.
Okay. Mr. Investigator?
Excuse me, members, there's a correction in the September 28th, 2011 correspondence, item number 2. The code section that's referenced 49.5.18 should actually be LA Ad Code Section 20.60.4.
Be duly noted. Okay.
So you're the investigator
Yes, Special Investigator Brian Young with the Controller's Office.
with your vast number of investigators in the Controller's office?
Yes, the one and only investigator for the Controller at this point in time.
We heard this in the Audits and the Government Efficiency Committee and approved it and sent it
Yes.
forward. The issue is to strengthen the policies, do the training, make people aware of the situation that takes place, and we know we've had some situations that were brought to public's attention. Anything you can add to that as to why we need to move forward with this?
Well, I mean, basically, it's the ordinance as written right now. There's no mandate. It's expected that fraud and waste will be reported to our office. And, you know, quite often we find out that there are matters that should have been reported to our office that have not. And I think it's not a good situation when we have to read about it in the newspaper. We should know about it up front. So I think by strengthening this ordinance, it will more or less mandate that when departments discover some type of fraud and waste, that is actually reported to our office so we are aware of it. And if an investigation needs to be initiated, that the investigation is done correctly, is done the right way. I think the intent of having an independent watchdog is to have, you know, a watchdog that can do it independently instead of having every department do their own internal investigations. I mean, I think that's why it's really important that you have, you know, a mandate that the information comes to us, that we know about it, and that we can, you know, make a decision as to how to proceed on it, whether or not we're going to do it in-house or if we're going to work jointly with the department in doing an investigation.
And then we want training, education
Yes.
for the,
Yes.
of course, for all departments.
Yes.
So say it's in the Department of Public Works, Street Services, for example. The people are taking asphalt, going out and building private parking lots. So the employees know about it that are engaged in it, and some of the other employees may see it. How do we then enforce that? Is it the general manager we're going to hold responsible? In other words, someone's going to have to be held accountable, responsible for that activity once they become aware of it.
Right. And that's something that we're going to have to work through with the city attorney's office as to the actual language and strengthening it. In regards to holding somebody accountable for information that they didn't provide, you know, that's kind of something that we really need to make sure that we have a very strongly written ordinance to make sure that it's done correctly. But, the intent is to make sure that it is reported, and if there's information that's withheld, obviously, you want to start at the top. You want to find out why wasn't it reported, and yes, who should be held accountable for that. But
It'll be worked into the ordinance?
Yes, and we're gonna be, the city attorney is gonna have to do some research as to the best language to include in the ordinance.
So we want to build a structure to make it more responsible for city employees to do their job in transgressions, waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yes.
To require, to compel that someone finds out, they bring it forward. So investigation can be done and discipline can be administered. We know that from the history, there's been some serious issues with waste, fraud, and abuse in the past, and it seems that departments don't really take it very serious.
That's correct. That's correct. So it's very important, especially in these times of economic crisis, more or less, that fraud and waste. We've done a number of matters where we've identified millions of dollars in contracts that expenditures really shouldn't have taken place. Wasteful expenditures. That's why it's really important that this information is brought to us so we can evaluate it, take a look at it, and make sure that our city resources are protected. I mean, that's what the goal is. I mean, we're all on the same team. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate losses.
Okay, so I would recommend that we approve the audit government efficiency report and then bring it back when the city attorney has finally completed that for further review and discussion.
One more quick question before we vote on it. So what are we anticipating the legal responsibility will be as a result of this, or will we not change this for an employee that runs across fraud? Are we now legally requiring them to report it? And if so, is there any kind of repercussion if they don't report fraud that is not of their own doing, but they are aware of it?
Right. That hasn't been finalized yet, and that's where we're going to have to work with the city attorney to make sure that we have it. They're going to have to research it to make sure we understand, what are the consequences if it's not reported, and who should be held accountable for it. So at this point in time, when the original ordinance was drafted, the city attorney had a big role in it. And again, they're going to have a big role in enhancing the ordinance once again. So that's something that I don't really have the answer today, but we're going to be working with the city attorney on that.
We may
Thank you.
want to look into the police department's code of conduct, and where an officer becomes aware of an allegation which could be misconduct, the obligation to report. We may want to look at what's already been in place with the police department.
Right, that's a good suggestion.
All right, well, we'll move this item forward without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So basically, you're concurring with the recommendations of
Yes.
audits with the technical amendment made by the city attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Controller Representatives.
Thank you. And item number 8, if we could have the CAO come to the table to present your report.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Lopez with the CAO's office. As part of Council File 110600, which is the Budget Council file, the CAO was instructed to prepare and present a listing of all the substitute and in lieu authorities for 2011 and 12. As this is an informational report, there's no council action required. As provided in Section 2 of each department's departmental personnel ordinance, the CAO is authorized to fill substitute authority positions to assist departments or bureaus in meeting specific operating needs. Often these are of a temporary or short-term nature. Some of the purposes include replacing an employee that is on a long-term leave, such as sick leave or workers' comp leave, or they can need them to meet their peak workload or to reduce their current backlogs, or sometimes to provide a temporary authority pending the adoption of the new DPO or Departmental Personnel Ordinance, or to provide overlap for positions to train. Similarly, in Section 3 of the DPO, it also provides the CAO the authority to approve the filling of positions in lieu of other vacant authorities, where the vacancies must have a salary range equal to or higher than the salary of the position being requested. And as part of the budget resolution, the City Council adopted a policy that any substitute position request that does not have a corresponding position held vacant and will incur additional salary cost would require council approval. So the listing you have before you has been already reviewed by the CAO, and it would not incur additional salary costs for the city. In fact, in lieu authorities actually would save us money because they're being filled at a lower pay than what's actually authorized.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? No. All right, so we will note and file that report without objection. And item number 9.
For item number 9, the fire department has submitted a report in response to Motion Parks Corretts. This is regarding the voluntary issuance of identification cards and termination.
Good afternoon, council members. Trevor Richmond, Planning Section Commander. In October of 2009, the Councilmember Parks presented a motion directing the fire department to report back to this committee with regard to 3 areas. Area number 1, the voluntary issuance of identification cards after termination and or retirement in lieu of. Area 2, a process to close out personnel investigations subsequent to retirement and or separation from the department. And lastly, the use of a deposition or court testimony as part of a personnel complaint investigation when the employee fails to cooperate. As you can see from the report back from the fire department, we've answered those questions. I think what I would like to do, it's hard to capture in a written report the process in which the fire department issues identification cards to retired members. I have Special Investigator Paul Hayashida will explain the process that we use.
Good afternoon, council members. Paul Hayashida, Chief Special Investigator, Professional Standards Division. In regards to the process that we use to decide whether identification cards should be issued to retired members, when we're notified by our personnel services section that a member intends to retire, we look in our complaint tracking system to see if there is either a recently closed investigation or an investigation that's pending on the member at the time. What we look at is whether or not there's a probability on an open investigation that the investigation shows that the allegations would be sustained and the nature of the allegations. If the allegations are serious, such as criminal in nature, related to EEO issues, involve moral turpitude or other significant issues, we will compile that information and present that to the fire chief, who will ultimately decide whether or not a retirement ID is issued. That is a process that was instituted and in 2006 after an incident where a fire captain was accused of homicide by LAPD. That is a process that has worked successfully in denying identification cards to individuals who we believe were trying to escape the discipline that we were intending to impose with a retirement.
Now, I have a deep backup question, which is, what's the purpose of issuing these ID cards in the first place? Why do we issue them to retired personnel?
This is something that we tried to find out for ourselves, and the best answer I could give you, council member, is this is a tradition that we've kind of patterned after LAPD. LAPD does issue identification cards to their retired members. That's about the best answer I could give you.
There's a difference in LAPD, is because you carry a weapon, you go to retirement.
Yes, sir.
The department doesn't carry a weapon.
Yes, sir.
LAPD issues the retired card. On the back, it states that it's to be used in coordination with the federal law permitting retired members in good standing to carry a weapon. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're renewed every 5 years.
Yes, sir.
So maybe the fire department could do something in a ceremonial fashion versus because when you're retired from the fire department, you retire with the police department. You don't have a volunteer reserve program as the police department does. So there is a distinction, but I think it's been, do they get the badge also?
I think there's a retirement badge, but not an official department issued badge.
But it would just be basically for...
I mean, it seems like kind of an oddity, because does it give you the right to run into a burning building where you wouldn't be able to otherwise? I mean, is there any reality connected to it?
I think Councilmember Zine captured it. It's ceremonial.
Yeah. Like the gold watch.
Yes, sir.
That you get the ID card.
So you can't really use it for anything.
No, sir. We do have arson investigators who do carry weapons, and I think a process very similar to what you described is used for our arson investigators.
So are they allowed after they're retired to continue carrying firearms?
I'm not certain. I think it's case by case. Peace officers, if they've...
Council members, there is a process in our arson investigation unit to review them for their viability of having a concealed weapons permit upon retirement. Those are also mandated under the Penal Code, and I forget what the section is, that allows the department to issue them that retirement ID for peace officers and the ability to carry a weapon. It's very much patterned after LAPD's process, I believe.
It's not just because you retire, you get it. There has to be in good standing.
Yes.
And every 5 years and certain qualifications.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I can see if it doesn't really serve a purpose other than ceremonial. And if there was an ID card made up for, honorably retired member of the LA City Fire Department, I know with the police department, you have to pay for the badge. You have to pay for that, which you can purchase after you retire. An identification card, if they made them pay for it and it was a ceremonial, like when they go to the retirement party, they get an identification, honorably retired. And in fact, the state law was recently changed that on the police badge, it has to be boldly stated retired or honorably retired. That was a recent change in the state code. It used to be just a little retired ribbon. But I think something could be, I don't see any problem with giving it to honorably retired firefighters because they've done most of the time 30 plus years. And they like that. It's not going to get them admission or anything. It's not going to give them any discounts anywhere. It's just, like a token of appreciation from their years of service. I don't see anything wrong with it.
No, it seems harmless at the same time. It also seems kind of unnecessary. So.
If you weren't a firefighter, so you wouldn't know.
I mean, I don't know if there ever would be a use for it. If there's an emergency and someone's trying to prevent them from going into a building and they want to say, hey, I'm a retired firefighter, I know how to do this.
Most retired firefighters would not want to do that.
Well, it seems innocuous enough, so.
So what is actually the request?
I think we're just concurring with the Public Safety Committee on noting and filing the report, so if you want to make that motion.
So then they would voluntarily issue the identification after termination. Well, termination is one issue. Termination means you're fired.
Yes.
Honorably discharged. I wouldn't want to give them if they get fired for some misconduct, I wouldn't want to give them an identification card because the police department, that's an option of the chief of police. So if you get fired, you're not going to get an identification card to carry a weapon. I think that termination, you get terminated, you don't get anything.
And that was the process that I described where we review it and make recommendations to the fire chief. So.
But why does it say termination, voluntary issuance of identification after termination? And so you would deny it in a termination, I would hope, and retirement they would receive something.
If they retire while an investigation is pending and the allegations are sufficient to warrant denying that issuance of the ID card, we believe that they're retiring to escape penalty. Then we will recommend to the fire chief that he deny.
But you would hold that card pending the outcome of the investigation.
It would not be issued. Well, if they're retiring.
If they retire, but they're still pending investigation.
Yes.
You hold that, and once the investigation is over, hey, they didn't do anything wrong, then they could get it after the investigation is complete, even though they retired.
It would be an assessment at the time that they retire whether or not our investigation would tend to support that the allegations would be sustained.
Like they misuse a fire truck for some illegitimate purpose.
It would depend on the allegation, would dictate our recommendation.
Just look at Channel 4 News.
So what's the process to close out a personnel investigation?
And are you asking specifically to what was on the motion, sir, or just in
On the
general?
motion and even for the purpose of determining the first issue, whether you're able to get your ID card because it was being held pending a personnel investigation.
Okay, the second question in the motion was a process to close out personnel investigations subsequent to retirement and or separation from the department. As you gentlemen know, we lose jurisdiction to impose discipline over an employee when they leave employment. That fact alone does not mean that we're going to stop our investigation. There may be compelling needs outside of the discipline process for the fire department to continue its investigation. An example of that would be concurrent civil litigation. There's some egregious EEO or discrimination issue that needs to be delved into, or there's a need to complete the investigation because of a policy flaw or whatever that we need to correct. We generally err on the side that if there's really any substantive reason to continue the investigation, even though we can't impose discipline, we will do that. And we'll often include the city attorney, the chief of staff, and other involved entities to help us as we move forward. But because they've left employment, we can't discipline.
Okay, thank you.
Whether either voluntarily retired or quit.
Yes, we basically lose the ability to impose any discipline. So.
Okay, so without objection, we will note and file this report. And I believe we are done with the agenda, and we are adjourned.